The first question, will you pledge to fully repeal Obamacare?
Yes.
Second question.
If I can expand just briefly to say this. If we do not repeal Obamacare, that's why this election is so important. If Obamacare gets implemented in 2014, it will create an entitlement that we will never be able to recover from. That is the tipping point. That's why this is so important to repeal, defund, and ultimately replace with free market reforms. When I was in the state legislature back in 2010, we were one of the first groups to ever pass the Healthcare Freedom Act, which was unfortunately thrown out by the Florida Supreme Court. But in Washington, D.C., job number one is to repeal Obamacare so that we don't create another entitlement for 40 million people that is going to put our country right off of the cliff.
We're in a war on terror. Who are we fighting?
We are fighting a radical ideology of Sharia Islam. And in a lot of ways, we're also fighting ourselves because we are not even willing to admit that an enemy even exists. We cannot allow political correctness or multiculturalism or appeasement cripple our defenses at home or abroad. We see it far too often. We saw it recently with the court case in Tampa. We're seeing it now more and more with situations like the honor killing in this area as well. We recognize that there is an ideology that seeks to destroy the West and seeks to destroy America from within. We need to identify it and we need to fight back against it.
We do need health care reform. What is your plan?
The question is health care reform, and I think what's most important is that we put patients at the center of every decision. We need to make changes to the tax system so that the incentives are the same for individual health care as well as for companies that provide health insurance to their employees. We need to have regulatory reform so that patients and consumers can buy health insurance across state lines. We need to have litigation reform, something that when I was in the state legislature, I was a strong sponsor of tort reform to crack down on the junk lawsuits that have made doctors practice the type of defensive medicine that runs up the cost of medicine for everybody else. And if we have transparency in costs and people have an opportunity to put their money into the system as opposed to a third-party payer, people are going to understand what the costs are and how to better spend their money. And what will happen in result is that costs will come down and quality of care will go up, just like it does in every other sector of our economy. And I think what's most important, and the battle that we face in this issue of healthcare reform, is that we must go back out and be certain that we define healthcare as a responsibility and not healthcare as a right.
We all know the Paul Ryan plan does not affect anyone 55 years and older with regards to Medicare. Do you endorse the Paul Ryan plan, and why or why not?
I think I mentioned a few moments ago, I'm the only candidate in this race that endorsed the Paul Ryan plan, and my only criticism is that it doesn't go far enough, fast enough to balance the budget and get us back on a path to fiscal stability. But I support it because if we do not fix Medicare, it is going to go insolvent. And that's not just me saying it. The Medicare trustees have come out with a report that say Medicare is going bankrupt in 2024. If we don't change the system for future generations, if we don't make it more patient-centered, healthcare inflation and more baby boomers who are coming onto the system right now is going to bankrupt this system, and it's going to collapse. It's going to result in impacts to benefits for current beneficiaries, and it's going to have an impact on future generations who not only are not going to be able to access these benefits, they're going to pay higher taxes for it. They're going to have a lower standard of living because of it. They're going to lose personal freedoms. This is a line in the sand issue. I'm the only Republican candidate running for United States Senate that came out in support of the Ryan plan. And as I shared earlier, anyone who tells you that we can kick the can for 25 years down the road in order to fix this system just simply isn't being honest with
What do you think is the biggest problem with our economy, and what actions would you propose?
The biggest problem with our economy right now are twofold. One is there's uncertainty. The second biggest problem have been the policies of the last 2 years. And what I mean by that is quite simple, is that there are attempts to raise taxes, to increase regulations. We're seeing right now the backdoor attempts at the National Labor Relations Board to try to implement card check in a way that they can't get it passed through Congress. When I was in the state legislature, I led the initiative to save the right to a secret ballot in the workplace. When they found out that they couldn't get it passed through Congress, now they're trying to dictate to Boeing where they can create jobs. Now they're trying to shorten the time for a union election in the workplace. These are frontal assaults on capitalism, on private industry. The EPA is doing it with the end around to try to have a cap and trade program without congressional authority. These are the types of regulations that are stifling economic growth that we need to eliminate, and we need to be able to put more power back into the free market economy to create jobs and to be able to grow our economy again.
Will you sign a pledge that you will not support any form of fixed rail public transportation?
I can tell you this, that when I was in the legislature, the legislation that was passed to support it, I came out recently and agreed with Governor Scott on not funding the high-speed rail. And I think it's the same with the Sunrail. I don't believe those are the types of projects that are the types of infrastructure projects that government spends on that are creating jobs that are out there. I think it is very important for us to have private sector job creation and make sure that government isn't subsidizing those types of infrastructure projects and work projects to build more infrastructure that people aren't using.
What are we going to do to eliminate our dependence on foreign oil?
Well, let me just share with you this. I think it is critical for us to drill domestically off the coast of Florida, in the Gulf, in Anwar, as well as the new shale technologies for domestic production of oil and natural gas. I'm the only candidate in this race who supported legislation in Tallahassee to drill off of Florida's coast. And even after the BP incident, as I mentioned, I stayed firm because this is a national security issue. We must reduce our dependence of sending trillions of dollars to foreign countries who do not like us very much in order for us to get our energy. We need to be energy independent and energy secure, and first and foremost is an all of the above energy policy. When I was in the legislature, I supported nuclear power and still do. I support offshore drilling, and any type of alternate energy needs to survive on its own without government subsidies or government mandates or any type of cap and trade or carbon tax scheme.
Yeah. Should there be public unions?
There may be a role for employee unions, and I know many of you may have come from one. I'm the son of two former public school teachers who were in the teachers union back in Brooklyn, New York, back in the day. I think those unions have outlived their purpose. And what I think what's most important to understand is that as taxpayers, we are the ones who are providing the benefits for those public employees. And there has been far too often, you've seen this game be played between the public employees and the elected officials, where they support them in the campaigns in exchange for increasing their salary and increasing their benefits. And so if there is a way to eliminate that process, and I believe there is, which would be to eliminate the automatic deduction of union dues from paychecks, I think that would be a great first step. But I think in terms of public employees in general, I think it's outlived its purpose, and more so, I know here in Florida it's in the Constitution, but more so I support a federal right to work legislation so that we do not have the types of problems that we have today where either private employee unions or public employee unions are holding employers over the barrel and extracting benefits that either taxpayers can't afford or companies can't afford.